Welcome. So in this video, I decided I would try to connect some concepts, help you kind of understand the cell cycle a little better, how cell division is incorporated with it, and why we concentrate so much on mitosis. Why is mitosis such an important part of cell division? As well as trying to understand some fundamental mechanics of how cells are dividing, better understand terminology, and better understand how chromosomes fit into this puzzle of cell division and how the information contained in them needs to be maintained in order to have a healthy cell. So to begin, this is an animal and it has cells. This animal is a tarsier, which is a relative of Homo sapiens, us, and all their primates. And as this tarsier is explaining, it has way more than just a few cells, trillions of cells. So this thing is a giant, well-organized cluster of differentiated cells that do a variety of things, but together they coordinate to be a tarsier. Now, I'm not sure how accurate this is, but let's just imagine that each cell of this animal has 4 different types of chromosomes inside of it. So what you see here is a nucleus, and so this is the nucleus, right? There's a nuclear membrane, right? These are each chromosomes. So we have 8 total. This would be then the cell membrane on the very outside coming along here. And this would be the cytoplasm. This is not the focus of the video, so I left it out. And the organelles as well. So if we imagine that this tarsier cell, apparently it's coming out of its eyeball. If this tarsier cell has 8 chromosomes inside the nucleus, we can also assume that all of the cells, not just its eye cell, has 8 chromosomes in every one of their nucleuses as well, or nuclei. And as you can see here, each cell type has 2 copies of each type of chromosome. So there are literally different types of chromosomes inside. Here we have a pair. We have a pair here. There's a pair. And here's a pair as well. These chromosomes look very similar to one another, and we will be talking about the fact that chromosomes usually do come in pairs such as this. They're often different sizes, and they contain different genetic material within them. If there are 4 different types of chromosomes, and there are 2 copies of each type, I'm not trying to belittle you with this question, but how many total chromosomes would be in each nucleus of this tarsier's cells, or cell? Well, if you said 8, you would be correct, right? So there's 4 pairs, 4 different types, and they are in pairs, so 4 times 2, right? So what happens if you have 4 different kinds of shoes, gym shoes, dress shoes, whatever, okay? How many shoes would you have total? Well, if they come in pairs, you have 4 different types, but they come in pairs, so you have 8. So here's something to consider as well. If this tarsier has trillions of cells and each cell has 8 chromosomes inside of it, how many chromosomes are you talking about inside of an actual living body? How would you do that math? Yeah, that's a lot of chromosomes. And so cells that have 2 copies of each chromosome type in each of their cells, these are called diploid cells. Okay, and it should clue you in that it's a diploid cell, that a diploid cell has 2 copies of each chromosome type because of that di prefix, right? So that means 2. So if you have a cell that has 2 copies of each chromosome type, then we call it a diploid cell, and that's some vocab to remember. So you would say, as a biologist, that tarsier cells are diploid. And to put this in a scope that might be a little more interesting or a little more relevant to your lives, in a human cell, So we are taking a cell off this child's nose here. In a human cell, there are 23 different types of chromosomes. And since we are diploid as well, that means we have a total of 46 chromosomes. In this blurry mess, you can see that the chromosomes have different sizes. They don't have to be bent over like they are here, but as a scientist, I'm sure it's hard to, string along these things so they're totally straight. But just take a look at this blurry chromosome pair versus this blurry chromosome pair. You can see that they do definitely look different. And if you're wondering where are genes, genes are actually on each of these. There's little stripes, and the stripes are our genes, and the genes make the proteins that make you who you are. Hair color, eye color, height, they're all found within here. So in these 46 chromosomes, you have the information for making a human. So just putting this in a little different orientation, you can see here that I've circled a pair of chromosomes. Okay, and once again, there are 4 types. I'm just circled one of them. And some new vocabulary here. Each chromosome pair that looks alike are called homologous chromosomes. So, when you have 2 chromosomes that are kind of like a pair, they are called homologous chromosomes. And try to remember that you could have probably figured this out due to the prefix, right? Homo means alike, so these are alike chromosomes. And in this stage, the word actually log here kind of makes me think of like a giant, log, like the piece of wood. And since there's only one chromatid in each of these chromosomes, okay, so here's 2 chromosomes, and they each have just one chromatid each, so they're kind of like logs. You can kind of think of it like that. Maybe it'll help you remember. Now, where did these 2 come from? Well, they actually come from each of your parents, or in the case of the tarsier, its mom and dad. So of the 4 different types of chromosome, dad gave you one type, mom gave you the homologous chromosome of that type. Here, dad gave you one of this type, mom gave you one of that type. Dad gave you one of this type, mom gave you one of this type. And you can just keep going along, right? There's the other one. So your parents actually give you a copy of each of those chromosome types, and together they create your homologous pairs. So if we were to lay them out, maybe you would say, here's the one dad gave you, here's the one dad gave you, here's the one dad gave you, here's the one dad gave you. And then there's the one mom gave you, there's the one mom gave you, there's the one mom gave you, there's the one mom gave you. And in reality, the sperm would be far smaller than the egg you see here. But what happens is this sperm will then go inside the egg and fertilize it, and that will create the first cell of a potential child. When the nucleus inside of the sperm with 23 chromosomes in a human, and the nucleus of the egg with another 23 chromosomes fuse together to create a cell that has 46 chromosomes. And that cell actually has a special name, and it's called a zygote, which is one of my favorite words ever, and I don't know why. But of course, in the case of the tarsier we've been talking about, the sperm would have 4 chromosomes and the egg would have 4 chromosomes, making a total of 8. So mom and dad each contribute a chromosome of each type to create their offspring's homologous chromosomes. This, by the way, is why we have diploid cells. When mom and dad both give you a copy of each, you have 2 of each chromosome. So now you are ordained a diploid cell. Now, dad's sperm and mom's egg, those are actually called haploid cells because they had only one copy going into the process. But once the haploids come together, they will create the diploid cell. So a zygote is a diploid cell, the first. But that's all well and good. One cell, you got your zygote there. but you are no longer a zygote. And the same with this here tarsier. It started with as a zygote as well, but now, right, we said it's more than a trillion cells, or around a trillion cells. How did that happen? How do you go from 1 to a trillion, right? If I have a single dollar bill and it turned into $1 trillion bills, that would blow my mind. So how do these cells multiply? And as our talking tarsier correctly stated here, through asexual cell divisions. Now, yes, we reproduce with sexual reproduction, but our bodies maintain themselves, heal, and grow through asexual reproduction. So we do asexual reproduction to more maintain our bodies, but to create offspring, we will do sexual reproduction. This talk is more about the asexual. But to better understand the whole chromosome concept and how they contain information, it's a little bit abstract, so I thought I would kind of hammer this down with using an analogy to help us think about cell division. And instead of using genetic information and chromosomes, which you probably are a little less unfamiliar with, the idea of using books with text inside of them will be better. So let's say you are a huge Harry Potter fan. You're a super fan and you want your firstborn, right? So as a kid, you read Harry Potter and your life goal was to pass down your Harry Potter collection. But the thing is you cannot let go of your collection. You would still like to have your collection, but you would like to make maybe a duplicate collection for your child. So you are going to hold on to your Harry Potter book while trying to create a duplicate for your child. And the question is, how would you do that? How would you create an exact duplicate copy of your collection for your kid? What could you do to make sure they had your exact collection? And I guess Amazon would work. But let's ignore that obvious solution. And let's say we can duplicate books like cells duplicate chromosomes during cell division. Let's say we can duplicate books like cell division in an eukaryotic diploid cell does with chromosomes. So a chromosome will equal a Harry Potter book in this analogy. And once again, books are a really good analogy for chromosomes since both contain information. I think, frankly, a cookbook would probably be a better analogy since cookbooks give you directions on how to create things, which is what the DNA does. It gives you directions, gives your bodies directions on how to create proteins. In a cell, the nucleus will provide the information for how to create proteins that cell needs or that cell generates. So a cookbook, right, it kind of does something similar, what you want to create. But let's just stick with Harry Potter because, magic. It's fun and stuff. So just like there are 4 different chromosome types, there are 4 different book types. Here we have Goblet of Fire and the Deathly Hallows and the Chamber of Secrets and the Sorcerer's Stone. None of these books I have read myself. Anywho, what makes the 4 books different from each other? Hopefully you realize they are totally separate stories. They're totally different stories. They have the same central character, but they are not the same story. I haven't read the books, but I can tell by the title. They are different stories. In that way, they have totally different information within them. There are words that come together to paint a whole different narrative in your mind while you're reading it. Well, just like those books, there are 4 different types of chromosomes, and each of them have different genetic information on it, or in it. The genetic information on each of these is going to be different, and you could think of them like they make different books. They are telling different stories. So this chromosome would do vastly different things for the body than these chromosomes would, than these would. Maybe the one I just circled has the tarsier's hair color, and then these have eye color. Okay, regardless, the information within these chromosomes are going to be different. So we have 4 different books to represent the 4 different chromosomes. But something obviously looks a little off here, right? So if these are supposed to represent that book, and these for that book, for that book, for that book, something a little off, right? Here there's 1 book, but there's 2 chromosomes. And the same goes for the other 4. 1 book, 2 chromosomes. So what needs to be done? Aren't there 2 chromosomes for each type shown below? So what is missing from this analogy? Well, hopefully you said we need to have homologous pairs of books. Just like we had homologous pairs of chromosomes, we need homologous pairs of books for this analogy to work well. What I thought of in my strongest moment of creativity, we just find different versions of each book. Okay, so as you can see here, we have the Goblet of Fire and the Goblet of Fire, the Deathly Hallows and the Deathly Hallows, Sorcerer's Stone, Sorcerer's Stone, Chambers of Secrets, chamber, apparently there's only 1 chamber with secrets in it. But the idea here is that we have 1 story here, but 2 versions that are probably almost identical to one another. Once again, I haven't read it, but okay. And then here is another story, and both of these versions are probably super similar, here and here as well. So, to stick with our analogy here, so apparently you love Harry Potter so much that you own all the alternative versions of the 4 stories, right? So like maybe the Goblet of Fire is easy to find in a bookstore, but like you found this version of the Goblet of Fire like in some, I don't know, garage sale. You went to a garage sale. Same thing here. Okay, so you own not only the common version of that book, but some maybe a version of the book that isn't sold in stores any longer, right? So I did this specifically. I made, the same story, but 2 different versions of the story, because that's how homologous chromosomes work. Okay, they pretty much have the same genetic story written on them, but the one you get from your mom is going to be a little different from the one you get from your dad. I mean, they're both going to have this, like a gene for eye color, but one version might have blue as the gene, and the other version for eye color might have like brown. And that is actually how our genetic diversity occurs. And we'll go further during genetics, and if you're paying attention now, your understanding of genetics will be far greater. So taking a look at this, so both versions of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire are basically the same information-wise, but they have slight differences. Maybe this one had Times New Roman font, while this one had Arial or whatever. And then maybe this one had a few spelling errors in it, and this one has those edits. They fixed the spelling errors. And definitely there's different covers to them. And that's kind of our analogy when we're talking about homologous chromosomes. We got the 2 different versions of the same genetic story right here, but they're going to have slight differences. Like I said, maybe this one you got from your dad, and it has the gene for, black hair. And then this one you got from your ma, and it has a gene for hair color as well, but let's say it's red hair. So they are going to code for slightly different proteins, just like these 2 books or altered versions of the text. So right here you see the 4 different books where they are now analogous to the 4 different chromosomes. Right, so here we go. We got the homologous pairs, this type of chromosome, and this type of book. Homologous pair, homologous pair. Homologous pair of chromosomes, homologous pairs of the Sorcerer's Stone. Okay? So this looks way better, and it's a far more accurate representation if we're going to do this analogy. add it together, you have 8 chromosomes total here. Okay, count them up, you have 8, right? 4 different types. It's diploid cells, so times 2, so you have 8 chromosomes total. And here you have the 8 books, 4 different types, and you got our homologous pair of books here. But before we continue, we should probably get closer to figuring out how cells divide, and then we can continue with our analogy. So this is what the chromosomes would look like inside of a nucleus in a cell. And once again, we have the 4 different types, each with a homologous pair, and 8 chromosomes total. And when we're talking about how cells are dividing, you might think, well, if it's just 8 can be divided by 2, why don't we just, grab this and put it in the new cell, and grab that and put it in the new cell, and then grab this and put it in the new cell, grab that one, put it in the new cell, and then in the other cell that's made, we'll just grab the other ones, or something like that. Why not just split the chromosomes in half? But if you think about it, remember, the mother cells have to be the same as the daughter cells, or vice versa. So if there's 8 chromosomes, remember, this is asexual reproduction we're doing here. That's the cell division, asexual. So it has to be the exact same, mothers and daughters. So if it's 8 chromosomes here, then the daughters also have to have 8. So what are we going to do here? We can't just split the chromosomes up. Well, that was what S phase was all about, if you remember. So what happens to the DNA during S phase? So the DNA that makes up these chromosomes, what happens to it during S phase? Well, the DNA is duplicated, and if you remember, S phase is actually technically part of interphase, and the DNA is not in chromosome form. It's actually in a form of chromatin. It's an unraveled form of the DNA. So clearly I could not have this organized to show that, so I just put the DNA in chromosome form here, but this is essentially what happens after S phase. The DNA is duplicated, and instead of just one chromatid per chromosome, something has changed. So here you are seeing the X-shaped chromosomes that appear during prophase. Now, if this was actually prophase, though, this nuclear membrane would be breaking apart, right? The centrioles would be dropping down at each pole. But this is essentially what it looks like as prophase. Now we see that stereotypical X shape. Let's see how well you remember the verbiage here. Now, instead of 8 chromosomes with 1 chromatid, we have what? How many chromosomes with how many chromatids? So hopefully you said we would have 8 chromosomes, each with 2 chromatids. But why did the S phase need to happen in the first place? So I kind of alluded to it a second ago. But why did we need to do S phase again? Well, when cells divide, the chromosome count of the mother cell has to equal that of the 2 resulting daughter cells. So when mom splits in 2, you have to have the same number of chromosomes that started in mom as is in the daughters. What you see here is a cell. Here is the mother cell, and she has entered the first part of prophase here, and all the DNA has raveled up into chromosomes, and each chromosome of the 8, each of them have 2 chromatids, which give it that X shape. So when the cells divide, each new resulting cell needs the exact same number of chromosomes. So if we have 8 chromosomes here, the chromatid count is not important. It's the chromosome number. So if we have 8 chromosomes here, we need 8 chromosomes here and here in the resulting cells. But you'll notice that although there is 8 chromosomes, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, they each only have 1 chromatid. While here, in the mother, they each chromosome had 2 chromatids. All that happened is this split in half. 1 chromatid went into one cell, and the other chromatid went in the other cell. You can take a look at it right there. So we'd have a prophase type thing happening here. And then we zoom all the way to telophase right here. And then we get ready for cytokinesis. Cytokinesis is ended here. And at this point, the DNA would unravel and become chromatin again, and the cell is entering, each of these cells is going to enter G1 of interphase. So, instead of chromosomes again, It's much easier to think of, instead of genetic information, to think of text in books. So back to our analogy. Remembering what just happened to the chromosomes in S phase, take a look at our chromosomes here. Sorry, our books here. We have 4 stories. Each has 1 copy of each book, and there are 8 books total. So if this is your collection that you want to give to your child, but you also want to maintain the collection, what are you going to do, right? You want all these books for yourself, but you also want to give your child a duplicate. So remembering what happened in S phase of the chromosomes, what do you think is going to happen to these books in our little analogy here? So hopefully you can see here that each chromosome, each book has had a duplicate copy. What you had here was a number of chromosomes with 1 copy of each book. That was almost like 1 chromatid. And now each has 2 chromatids, 2 copies. 4 types of stories, 2 copies of each book, 8 books total. And so if it would be easier, let's bring up the chromosomes. So that's kind of what we're looking at here, right? So maybe here's 1 chromatid, here's another chromatid, book-wise, just like there's 1 here and 1 here, right? 1 chromatid, just like here and here. 1 chromatid of the chromosomes, and then book-wise here and here, okay? I think having textbooks makes this a little easier because you can see that, yeah, there's a lot of repetition here, right? This is the same. So now not only do we have Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, this version, and we have a very similar version here, we've actually duplicated those books. Sorcerer's Stone, we have 2 Sorcerer's Stones, but we also have duplicates of each version. And that's the whole concept behind the, right, homologous chromosomes with 2 chromatids. Each, especially if you look at just, let's look at this bigger one right here. In this bigger chromosome, the exact same, these are not sort of, this is the exact same information on both of these chromatids. Same thing here, right? This is the exact information. Both of these chromatids have the exact information on them. They are truly exact copies of one another. While the homologous chromosomes in general are very similar, right? Just like the books here and here, right? Chambers of Secrets, they are very similar copies. These are going to be exact copies. And that is what you need to realize when we're talking about how we're going to make this whole thing happen in the analogy. How are you going to have a set of all these books and your child? How are they going to have a set of all these books? So why is this necessary? Why did we do this? Why do we have so many copies of the same book? Well, remember, we had 8 books that we started with. And when the cells divide, right, when you get ready to give your child the beloved Harry Potter collection that you have, you're going to need to do some duplicating. So we'll call your collection the mother collection, or the mother cell collection, and then if there was 8 books in that collection, you will need to end up with 8 books in the daughter cell collection. Here is our original mother cell collection, and the daughter cell collection must contain the same amount of books here. Going a little overboard here, let's see this happening in metaphase of mitosis. You'll see all the books are lined up at that middle point. Here we go, we have anaphase of mitosis of these books, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, so it's looking good, right? Because we needed 8 books to go on either the collections to divide, right? That one's going this way, this one's going that way. And here we have telophase. And you'll see that, let's say this is the daughter collection of the books, and then here is yours. So you were able to maintain yours, right? So it's complete. We have 4 types of stories, 1 copy of each book, and 8 books total over here. And the same over here. Now just to clarify terminology, right? The 4 types of stories. Once again, 2 copies of each type of story. Goblet of Fire, Goblet of Fire. Chamber of Secrets, Chamber of Secrets. Sorcerer's Stone, Sorcerer's Stone. Deathly Hollow, Deathly Hollow. But we have 8 books total, and 1 copy of each specific version of them. So perfect, you ended up with duplicates of all the books you started with. So now you can force your child to like the things you like and give them their own copy of all the books. And it's important that we think of this because, what would happen if this didn't go right? What would happen if all the chromosomes didn't duplicate? Just like if you see all the books weren't duplicated here. So here's your collection, and this is the one you're giving to your kid. Are they going to be able to know the story as well as you? Especially not right here, right? There's no Sorcerer's Stone. They won't know, the epic that is whatever that book's about. Or what happens if only portions were given to your kid? So here's and then here's the one you gave to your kid. Oh my God, look at it's all busted up. Can your child read the information and get the necessary information to figure out the story if sections of the books are gone? Can you figure out the entire plot of a movie if you walk into a 2-hour movie and you walk in an hour and a half late? So in conclusion, mitosis is a precise process that occurs in dividing cells to ensure that each daughter cell has an exact copy of the genetic information that the mother cell had. If any information was lost or is damaged during the process, the resulting daughter cells would not survive because it would lack crucial information it needs to survive, and crucial information that the cell needs to guide its cell processes. Just like if you gave those damaged or missing books to your kid, you shouldn't be surprised if the kid doesn't know the story as well as you. In that way, it's just like, oh, bummer, the kid can't follow a conversation on this topic I love so much. But in a cell, if you're missing an entire gene or an entire chromosome, the cell will not survive. So, hope you guys have enjoyed this little movie I made. And think about that when you're considering why is mitosis so special? Why do we talk about mitosis so much? Well, it's a process that needs to happen to make sure that cells can divide so you can go from being one zygote into a tarsier. All right, bye.